Hey y'all, this is a lesson on order of operations. When there's several operations in one expression, so add, subtract, multiply, divide, exponents, etc., there's a hierarchy of operations that need to be dealt with first, and you might recognize this as PEMDAS. PEMDAS is not a technically correct way to do things. It is just a mnemonic device that can help you simplify these expressions. It kind of puts things in a hierarchical order so that you can deal with simplifying expressions. This P stands for parentheses. Oops, spelled that wrong. There we go. E stands for exponents. I put M and D on the same line because division is technically the multiplication of fractions. So MD stands for multiplication and division. If you have these on the same line, you work left to right. Typically speaking, not every time, but generally speaking, that's what you're going to do. And then I put a S in the same hierarchy because subtraction is actually addition of integers. So addition, subtraction is the same thing. And what this does is it kind of, in your mind or as you're looking at things, it helps you prioritize operations. And it basically sets up these groups that you have to deal with. So these first three are technically your groups. You have to simplify your groups before you can add and subtract as the last step. And I'll try to highlight these as we go through them. So here's a couple examples. We have these expressions and we're just stating what you could do first. There's several options here. So maybe what I see first is not what you see first, and that's okay. If we're following PEMDAS, PEMDAS says you have to do parentheses first. And that is not wrong. You can do parentheses first. But technically, you could actually do multiplication first if you wanted to. This is a group. So you could deal with that group first. That's not wrong. So in the second one, same process. We can't do this before you deal with this group. So we really only have one option here. You're going to have to start with the group first. In the next one, we have 2 plus 3 times 9 plus 6. Now think about your hierarchy. Your hierarchy is parentheses, exponents, multiplication. We do have multiplication here, so you're going to have to do that first. You cannot add before you multiply. In the next one, you have two options. We do have division and we do have multiplication. So you could do either one first. You can choose. And then in this last one, we've got division, we've got multiplication, and we've got this parentheses. So there's several options here again. You can do that division, or you can do that parentheses. That's why I don't necessarily strictly teach PEMDAS, because while it's a great memory device, it's not the hard, fast rule. It's not the technically correct thing. There's several ways to do this. And then I have a couple examples here. We're stating what operation we're doing first. And this actually came from this table, so I'm using those same examples, looks like. And I mentioned that we could do parentheses first. We could also do 9 times 4 first. Now, I'm going to highlight this because I want you to see it. We have two groups separated by this minus sign. So we could do the I'm going to rewrite the problem. That's always a good habit. And then I'm going to simplify. This was a rewrite. 2 plus 3 is 5. 9 times 4 is 36. So we did this and this. Now before we do subtraction, we have this group that we have to deal with. We did parentheses, we did multiplication, we do have to deal with exponents. 5 to the third means 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. 125 minus 36 is 89, and that's it. So we don't have to do one step at a time. You can do 2 steps at a time if you want to. If you prefer doing 1 step at a time, that is totally fine. I am not against it. All right. Second one, we mentioned in the table that we were going to deal with the parentheses first. I am going to rewrite the problem because it's a good habit. Just make sure that when you rewrite, you've written the correct numbers and signs. Very important to stay organized in mathematics. And you'll notice that I lined them up. I have this nice neat box. This all keeps it neat and organized so that I don't lose track of anything. I am going to do the 4 minus 6 first. 2 plus 3. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. So I did parentheses first. This was a rewrite. And then I have these groups separated by plus and minus. So I need to deal with the groups before I add and subtract. The only group I can really deal with is this one. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. And then I have these other terms. So we multiplied. And now we can add and subtract. We have 2 minus 6. You'll notice I kind of skipped the plus. This negative pretty much takes over. So I have 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Minus 5 is negative 9. And that is adding. I mentioned earlier in the video that subtraction was just adding of integers. So you can see that here. This is 2 plus negative 6 plus negative 5. Some books just use a negative. They don't do plus a negative, but they mean the same thing. So you might see both, depending on your book. Okay, this one's nice and short. We have these groups separated by plus signs. So we need to deal with the groups before we add. That's what PEMDAS shows us in its memory device. I'm going to rewrite. I'm going to deal with the multiplication. This was a rewrite. This was a multiplication. And then last step is to add. 29 plus 6 is 35. Super simple. And then this one, I mentioned there were several things you could do. We can deal with this or this. I'm going to highlight that to show you. This is a group, this is a group, this is a group. So why did I highlight those things? Those terms are separated by this plus and minus. So it is naturally setting up our groups. And those groups are the things that need to be simplified first. So I'm going to rewrite. I really don't like this symbol, so I switched it to this. It means the same thing. Now I'm going to simplify my groups. Which means this was a rewrite. This was a divide and multiply. I did it in one step. And now I can add. And like I said, you could rewrite this as 8 plus negative 63 if you prefer, depending on your book. And then 8 minus 63 is negative 55. This is really neat. I like this problem because I want you to focus on this for a second. This says negative 2 squared, and it does matter that there's no parentheses. This is saying that I'm squaring the 2 and then making it negative. It does matter. So let's focus on that. I'm squaring the 2 and then making it negative. Okay? And then this little bracket is just another form of a parentheses. It's just a different parentheses. And inside that parentheses, I can simplify the denominator. So I'm going to leave this 4, I'm going to leave this 16, and then I'm going to simplify the denominator. You'll notice that I switched my brackets to parentheses. It doesn't matter, they mean the same thing. And now I have these two groups separated by a plus sign. I still need to do some simplifying. Here I can divide, and then I'm going to need to multiply. And so now I just have addition, and we get negative 36. So if you are a fan of PEMDAS, you could have done parentheses first, multiplication, parentheses first, exponents, multiplication, add, and you still get negative 36. So it's the same thing. This one looks like fun. We have a double parentheses here. Sometimes when there's a double parentheses, they'll change it to the bracket so that you don't get confused. So we are going to work inside the parentheses, but inside the parentheses, there's another parentheses. So let's start on the innermost parentheses and work our way out. A minus a negative becomes a positive, so I'm going to switch that. And then I'm going to add, and then I'm going to multiply. This next one looks like a lot of fun. I love this one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to simplify the numerator and the denominator, and then we're going to deal with division. All right, in the numerator, I have this exponent here that I need to simplify before I can multiply. So let me talk about that for just a second. I cannot multiply negative 3 times 5 because it is not negative 3 times 5. It's negative 3 times 5 squared. So this 5 is actually 25. So you have to be careful there. And then in the denominator, I'm going to do 5 minus 6. Leave it in the parentheses. That does matter. And let's see. We have our groups separated by these signs. So I'm highlighting those because I'm hoping it helps you see in the future as you're working on these on your own, oh, here's my groups. I can deal with those groups before I add and subtract. So I'm going to multiply. I'm going to do exponents and multiply. Okay, what I did here, I want to go over this. I went ahead and multiplied -2 times -4 to get +8. And this is -1 times -1, which is +1. So that's where I got those. I went a little fast. And now I'm going to simplify there, simplify there. We get 14 over 9. And that does not reduce, so we would leave it. You could leave it like this. This is fine. But depending on your teacher or your book or whatever, you might need to convert that to a mixed fraction. And that would be 1 5/9. So there's that. You could do a decimal. Typically they want it in fraction form, but either way is fine. They're the same to me. And then this last one is also really fun. This is actually an example of evaluating an expression, but evaluating an expression is just using order of operations with variables. So we have these variables here, but these variables represent numbers. So all we have to do is substitute in those numbers and simplify. So we have -2. I'm going to sub in what x equals. Again, I'm going to sub in what x equals. Whoops. X, sorry. And then what y equals. I have a minus sign. I'm going to sub in what y equals. See, all the green stuff is what I substituted in. And the purple stuff was the things that were originally there. So that's the color coding I'm doing. Now I need to do order of operations. I need to simplify this. So I have these groups that are separated by these plus and minuses. So I need to simplify these groups before I do these steps. In this group, I have a group. I cannot do -2 times 4 because it's not a 4. It's 4 squared. So I need to simplify that. 4 squared is 16. And then you might be concerned about all this multiplication here. Just take it one step at a time. 5 times 4 is 20. Times -2 is -40. And then the last part, we have -2 to the third. I'm going to go down here, do it in a different color so you can see. -2 to the third looks like this. And that's +4 times -2 is -8. And now we have our groups. I'm going to simplify further. Minus a negative becomes positive. And then we're just adding. -72 plus 8 is -64. That's perfect timing. I'm done with this lesson. My Apple Pencil is dying, so I'm going to go plug that in. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I hope you learned something.